A man stood on his porch in a quiet Charlotte neighborhood, checking his doorbell camera under the glow of a street lamp. He wasn't looking for trouble, just trying to figure out why his bell kept ringing at odd hours and why empty packages he didn't order kept showing up. It was strange, annoying, and he wanted answers. But across the street, his neighbor didn't see it that way. She watched him from her window, didn't trust what he was up to, and decided he was up to no good. Without waiting, she grabbed her phone and called 911, her voice full of worry. "There's a guy messing with a camera out here. Please send someone quick." The police showed up soon after, ready to sort things out. But what they found wasn't about the man at all. It was a surprise tied to her own family. Something that turned everything upside down and left everyone talking. Stick around for this story, because what happened next teaches a real lesson about judging too quick. The quiet evening on Elmwood Drive broke apart as a patrol car rolled up, its red and blue lights cutting through the dusk. Two officers stepped out, one a stocky guy with short gray hair and a stern look, named Officer Daniels, the other a younger woman with dark hair tied back and a calm but steady gaze, Officer Lopez. The tires crunched on the pavement, pulling a few neighbors to their windows, curtains twitching as whispers started to hum. The man on the porch didn't notice right away, his eyes fixed on his phone, fingers tapping the screen as he checked the camera app. It wasn't until Daniel's deep voice called out that he looked up. "Hey, you! We got a call about suspicious activity. What you doing out here?" He straightened, a bit startled but keeping it together. "I'm just checking my doorbell camera," he said, his voice steady. "Someone's been ringing it and running off for a few nights now. And I've gotten empty packages I didn't order." Lopez pulled out a notepad, her pen ready. "Empty packages? Got anything to show us?" He nodded, holding up his phone. "Yeah, I've got video from the camera. I'm trying to figure it out." Before he could explain more, a woman marched out from the house 2 doors down, her arms crossed tight over a gray sweater. Lisa Thompson was 55, known around Elmwood Drive for keeping everything in line. She'd lived there 20 years, always watching, always quick to point out what didn't fit. Under the street lamp, her face was set hard, her blue eyes locked on the man like he'd done something awful. "I told you," she said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "He's been out there all night messing with that thing, probably up to something bad. Who's going to believe a story about packages from a guy like him?" She pointed at him, her fingers stiff in the air. "I've been around long enough to know he doesn't fit in here, always keeping to himself. That's not right." The man, Mateo Rivera, a 30-year-old software engineer who liked his own space, slipped his hands into his hoodie pockets, taking a slow breath. He was used to eyes like hers, the kind that saw trouble where there wasn't any, just because of his brown skin and quiet ways. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said, keeping his tone even. "I live here and I just want to know who's bothering me." Lisa laughed, short and harsh. "Live here? Sure you do. I've seen you out late sneaking around. Don't think I haven't noticed. You're trouble, I can tell." She waved over Mr. Harris, a wiry guy in his 60s who'd come out in a faded flannel shirt to see what was up. "Tell them, Harris. You've seen him too, right? Always acting strange." Harris scratched his head, unsure. "Well, he's pretty quiet." Lisa cut him off. "Quiet? That's what they want you to think. He's hiding something." By now, 5 or 6 neighbors had gathered, their voices a low buzz, some nodding with Lisa, others just watching. Mrs. Jenkins, a gray-haired woman in her 70s who lived across the street, stepped closer, her slippers scuffing the pavement. "Lisa, maybe he's just fixing it," she said, but Lisa shook her head fast. "Fixing it? No way. He's up to no good, mark my words." Lisa wasn't stopping there. She took a step toward Mateo, her voice rising. "What's your deal, huh? Setting up that camera to watch us all? I've got a right to feel safe around here, and you don't belong." Mateo looked her in the eye, his jaw tightening just a bit. "I'm not watching anyone," he said, calm but firm. "I work I pay my bills, that's it. Maybe you're seeing stuff that's not there. He kept it simple, but inside he felt the old sting. Cops pulling him over back in Texas for nothing. Clerks trailing him in stores. Same old thing, he thought, holding her stare. Lisa's face went red. Work? Oh, I bet probably some shady scheme. I'm not buying it, and neither should you. She turned to Daniels, waving her arms. I called you for a reason. He's got no business acting like this. Daniels raised a hand, his voice low but steady. Ma'am, let's take it easy. We'll hear him out. But Lisa stood her ground, arms still crossed, her mind locked tight. He's a problem, I know it. People like him don't belong here. Mateo watched the officers step closer, his stomach knotting up. Here we go again, he thought. He'd been through this, questioned, stared at, pegged as trouble just for being him. Back home it was a cop holding him an hour over a busted light, smirking, "You look off." He hated it, the way it followed him no matter where he went. But he kept his cool, his voice clear. Check the camera if you want. I've got nothing to hide. The crowd's chatter grew louder, the air thick with tension, everyone waiting to see what came next. Daniels nodded, looking a little worn out. All right, let's see that footage. We'll sort this out. Mateo Rivera opened the app on his phone, his fingers moving quick and smooth. He was good with tech. Years of coding made it second nature. The screen flickered to life with a video from the night before. A blurry figure in a gray hoodie stepped onto his porch, pressed the bell fast, and ran off into the dark. The camera only caught their back, disappearing past the edge of the frame. Lopez leaned in, her eyes narrowing. Play it again. What's that on the backpack? Mateo zoomed in, pausing the video. A gold logo popped up, West Charlotte High, with a small yellow L stitched next to it. Daniels scratched his chin, his voice low. Looks like a teenager. You know any kids around here? Mateo shook his head. No. I live by myself, no young family or friends nearby. Lisa jumped in, her voice loud and firm. See, I knew it. He's mixed up in something. He's probably got kids doing his dirty work. Lopez turned to her, calm but straight. Anyone at your place go to West Charlotte High? Lisa blinked, caught off guard, then snapped back. What? No, just me and my husband. Why ask me? He's the one you should be checking. Her words spilled out fast, her hands waving, but a tiny flicker of doubt crept into her mind, gone as quick as it came. They're trying to turn this on me? He's the one who doesn't fit, she told herself, pushing it down. Daniels sighed. We need more than that. Let's see those packages and we'll take a quick look inside your place. Mateo frowned, his voice sharp. Inside? I haven't done anything. Lopez shrugged. Just to be sure. Won't take long. He hesitated, then nodded, leading them in. The door creaked open to a simple setup. A gray couch, a desk covered with papers and a laptop, a stack of Amazon boxes by the wall. He handed over a small, one empty, just crumpled paper with Mateo Rivera on the label. Here's one, he said. Lopez looked it over. This tracking number can help us trace it. I'll call it in. Daniels poked around, flipping through papers, coding notes, bills, then glanced at the laptop and cables. What's all this stuff? He asked. Work. I write code for a living, Mateo said, his tone flat but tense. They think I'm some kind of crook, he thought. Old memories bubbling up, cops digging through his car in Texas, asking about suspicious items that were just books. It burned him, the unfairness of it, but he stood still, letting them look. Outside, Mateo pulled up more footage. 3 nights back, the same figure, same quick bell press and run. It's been going on a while, he said, showing the screen. Lopez squinted. Same backpack? And heading toward her house every time. She nodded at Lisa's place across the street. Daniels raised an eyebrow. That's your place, right? Mateo nodded. Yeah. Heard. The crowd, 10 or 12 neighbors now, started talking louder. Mrs. Jenkins spoke up. Wait, could it be someone from her house? Lisa spun around. No way, he's making this up. Don't believe it. Mr. Harris chimed in. Maybe we should chill. She's getting worked up over nothing. Another voice cut through. Let's see what the cops say. He doesn't look like trouble. The noise grew, a mix of opinions clashing, pressing in on Mateo as he stood there, feeling every stare. His mind churned. Always the same. I'm the bad guy till they prove I'm not, he thought. Back in Texas, a cop once held him an hour over a broken taillight, smirking, "You look like you're up to something." It wasn't fair then, wasn't fair now, but he'd learned to push through. "Check the tracking," he said, his voice steady. "I've got nothing to hide." Lopez nodded, stepping away to call it in, while Lisa's hands shook, her face tight as the crowd's chatter turned against her. 20 minutes stretched out, the Charlotte night buzzing with tension as neighbors crowded closer. 15 now, maybe more, their voices a sharp hum against the stillness. Lopez's radio crackled, a voice cutting through. Tracking numbers tied to Lily Thompson, registered at 142 Elmwood Drive, same as the caller's address. Daniels turned to Lisa, his tone firm. "You've got a granddaughter named Lily." Lisa froze, her breath catching, her face paling under the street lamp's glow. Her hands shook as she gripped her arms, her voice stumbling out, "Yeah, but what's that mean? She wouldn't do anything." Lopez stepped closer, her voice cool and clear. "We checked it out. Your granddaughter's been sending empty packages to this man's address. Part of a scam to get free stuff from Amazon. The camera footage shows her ringing his bell and running back to your place." Lisa stood there, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. Her mind spun, a wave of shock crashing over her. Lily? No. It can't be her, she thought, the truth hitting hard. She hadn't known. Lily Thompson, her 18-year-old granddaughter staying with her for her last year at West Charlotte High, had picked up a trick called brushing from TikTok. She'd been ordering fake packages, getting free clothes and makeup sent to her name, then playing pranks like ringing Mateo's bell, all behind Lisa's back. But Lisa had been so sure, so dead certain, that Mateo Rivera was the problem, a troublemaker who didn't belong. She'd never once thought to look closer to home. Lily stepped out from the house across the street, her hoodie hanging loose, her head down. She looked small under the light, her voice shaky as she spoke. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I saw it on TikTok, thought I could get free stuff and maybe look cool to my friends," she sniffed, wiping her eyes. "I'd ring his bell sometimes, just for fun. He's so quiet I didn't think he'd care." Daniels looked at her, not pad ready. "Why pick him?" she shrugged, her voice breaking. "He's alone? Seemed easy." Lisa jumped forward, her voice loud and desperate. "Wait, stop. She's not like that. He's lying. It's got to be him." She pointed at Mateo, her hand trembling, but Lopez held up a hand. "We've got the proof, tracking numbers, video. It's her." Lily nodded, tears falling. "It's true. I messed up. I'm sorry." The crowd went quiet for a beat, then erupted. Mrs. Jenkins gasped. "Her own granddaughter? Are you kidding?" Mr. Harris shook his head. "Unreal. She's been yelling about him and it's her kid?" Another voice piped up. "Lisa, how'd you miss this?" Lisa spun around, her face red. "I didn't know. I thought he was the one. I was sure." She turned to the officers, her voice cracking. "He's the problem. You've got to see that. She's just a kid. She didn't mean it." But the truth sank in, heavy and cold. She'd told Lily once, over dinner, to watch out for strange people around here. Words she'd heard from her own folks growing up. She'd pointed out Mateo, said he didn't fit, warned her to steer clear. She never thought those words might twist, that her own lessons might have planted a seed, picking him because he was different, an easy target for a dumb teenage game. Lisa's knees wobbled, her hands covering her face. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking into a sob. "I thought it was him, I really did." The crowd's eyes bore into her, some shocked, some angry, all judging now. Mrs. Jenkins muttered, "She's been on his case for months. Turns out it's her own family." Mr. Harris crossed his arms. "She owes him an apology, big time." Mateo watched it all, standing still on his porch. All this because she couldn't see past me, he thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. He'd been right. Someone was messing with him. But the real sting was Lisa, the neighbor who'd pegged him wrong from day one. Her world flipped upside down, her certainty crumbling, and he saw it. The way her shoulders shook, the way she couldn't look up. She'd been so sure he was the bad guy. Now she was the one falling apart. The Charlotte night settled into an uneasy hum as the crowd lingered, their whispers sharp against the quiet street. Lily stood with her head down, hands stuffed in her hoodie pockets, facing the fallout. Mail fraud, Daniel said, jotting it down. A small charge, nothing too heavy, but a mark on her record that'd stick. She was 18, with college apps and big dreams ahead, but now every form she'd fill out would carry this. A quiet shadow of a mistake she'd made chasing TikTok fame. Her friends at school pulled back. Texts stopped coming. Whispers followed her in the halls. That's the girl who got caught. She'd wanted to be cool, to show off free stuff online. Instead, she got a lesson in shame, her voice barely audible as she mumbled, "I just didn't think." Mateo leaned against his porch rail, arms crossed, watching it wrap up. Amazon had sorted it out, refunded his account, sent a short note saying sorry for the mix-up. For him it was over, the truth clearing his name after weeks of feeling watched, judged. But for Lisa, the cost was steep, a price she hadn't seen coming. She stood there, shoulders sagging, her eyes red and puffy under the street lamp's glow. The neighbors she'd bossed around for years, folks who'd smiled at her garden tips or nodded at her meetings, looked at her different now. Mrs. Jenkins shook her head. She's been on about him forever. Turns out it's her own kid. Mr. Harris muttered. She thought she knew everything. Look at her now. It didn't end with whispers. A few nights later, the Elmwood Association called a meeting at the community center, a little brick building where Lisa had run things for years. She walked in, trying to keep her chin up, her sweater neat despite the shake in her hands. The room was full, chairs creaking, voices low. Mrs. Jenkins stood up. "We've got to talk about this," she called, 911 over nothing, stirred up trouble. "She's not fit to lead us anymore," Lisa's voice broke in. "I was keeping us safe. He didn't belong. I had to do something." But Mr. Harris cut through. "Safe? You made a mess. Your granddaughter's the one who did it." They voted fast, 10 hands up, 2 down. She was out, her spot gone with a quick thud of the gavel. She left, clutching her bag, the room emptying behind her. A letter came soon after, typed, blunt. Warning. Misuse of emergency services. Her name, once respected, was now a joke pinned up for all to see. Home wasn't a refuge either. Her husband Tom, a quiet guy who'd let her call the shots, snapped that night. Dishes clinked loud as he slammed a drawer. "You've wrecked us," he yelled, his voice rough. "All because you couldn't leave that guy alone. Now we're the ones everyone's laughing at," she cried back. "I thought he was trouble. You never stood by me." He grabbed a bag, stuffed it with shirts. "I'm done. I need a break." The door banged shut as he left, staying gone for days. The house turned silent. No steps, no talks. Just her alone with her thoughts. The street shifted too. Mrs. Jenkins stopped waving. No more friendly chats. Mr. Harris looked past her when she dragged the trash out, his wife mumbling, "She's lost it." Her garden, once her pride, sat untouched. Roses drooping, no prize this year. Her phone went quiet. No calls, no invites. The neighborhood newsletter left her out. Her years of work erased. She'd been the one they'd listened to. Now she was nobody. A week on, Lisa saw Mateo at his mailbox pulling out bills. She walked over, slow, her voice shaky. "Mateo, I got it wrong." "I'm sorry." He looked at her, steady. "Yeah, you did. Hope you think next time." She nodded, turning away, his words stinging deep. He didn't soften it. She'd earned that cold edge. Lily faced her own mess. School called her in, a stern talk about choices. Her friends faded. Her cool turned to whispers. She'd wanted attention, got it the hard way. At home, she and Lisa barely spoke. the air thick with blame. But Elmwood Drive changed for Mateo. Mrs. Jenkins waved one day. "Sorry about all that." Mr. Harris nodded. "You're all right." Kids smiled instead of staring. He stood on his porch one night, coffee warm in his hand, the bell silent. It felt different, quieter, better. For Lisa, it dragged on. She sat alone, blinds shut, TV flickering, old photos, her garden, her family, mocked her now. "I was so sure," she thought, tears falling. Her judgment hadn't saved anyone. It had cost her everything, her place, her people, her peace. She'd seen him as the threat. Now she was the outcast, paying a price she'd never imagined. Jumping to judge doesn't just hurt others, it can cost you everything you've built. Lisa's quick call turned her life upside down, showing that prejudice isn't just wrong, it's a trap that takes your trust, your home, your name when the truth comes out.